I didn't flinch when the HOA president waved the violation letter in my face and threatened to start foreclosure proceedings if I didn't restore my driveway. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't explain myself, and I certainly didn't argue. I just slid a folded packet across the table county engineering records with my name on every page, stamped and signed from years ago when I had been the one who designed, approved, and signed off on every single road in their precious subdivision. Watching her expression sink from arrogance to confusion and then to the cold, pale realization that she had picked the wrong person to bully, that was the quiet victory I'd been working toward for months. The truth is, I never moved here looking for a fight. My wife and I had chosen this neighborhood because it was tucked against the hills, quiet enough to hear the crickets at night, and not so far from town that grocery runs were a hassle. I had spent decades as a civil engineer, most of it in transportation and municipal infrastructure. I had worked 12-hour days on bridge projects, flood control systems, and subdivision road layouts that no one thinks about until they crack or fail. When I finally retired, I didn't want big projects anymore. I wanted to putter around the yard, spread some gravel on my own drive, keep my tools sharp, and maybe mentor my grandson when he came by with questions about math homework. That was all. Peace, routine, and a chance to enjoy the simple fact that I wasn't sitting in traffic anymore. So when the 8-0 entered my life, it was like a mosquito whining in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't take it seriously. Their first letter claimed I was in violation for using unapproved gravel on my driveway. Gravel, the same substance that lay beneath every road in the subdivision. They even cited a section of the covenants that didn't apply to driveways at all, just landscaping features. I laughed at the absurdity, figured it was a clerical error, and ignored it. Then they taped a neon orange notice to my garage door like I was some delinquent renter being evicted. That one claimed that non-conforming aggregate posed an aesthetic hazard to the neighborhood. It was insulting, not just because I knew gravel better than they ever would, but because it was my property, maintained with my money, and none of their business to begin with. I tried the polite route. I sent an email to the board pointing out that the covenants didn't cover driveway material. I attached photos, even included the subdivision's original development plan that I still had tucked away on an old hard drive, which clearly specified compacted gravel drives as standard. Weeks passed. No response except for another letter, this one threatening daily fines. When I called the president, she treated me like I was some sort of unruly child, said rules are rules, and that if I didn't like them, I could petition for an exception. That was the moment my patience started to crack. I wasn't angry yet, not in the shouting sense, I was just insulted. And when people with no knowledge, no training, and no authority try to lecture me about something I spent my entire career mastering, I don't let it go. Still, I gave them another chance. I attended a board meeting, stood up when it was my turn, and explained calmly that their violation notice wasn't supported by the bylaws. I even offered to meet them halfway and submit a formal letter requesting approval, just so they could have their paperwork. They smirked at me like I was wasting their time. The president said, in front of a dozen neighbors, if we let you have your ugly gravel, everyone will think they can do whatever they want. That was when the room shifted. I felt the silent wall of neighbors who didn't want to make eye contact, didn't want to take sides, didn't want trouble. I walked out that night knowing diplomacy had failed. That's when I stopped writing emails and started pulling records. I knew exactly where to look because I had been there decades before. Down in the county records building, in a room most people don't know how to navigate, I pulled the original plats, infrastructure agreements, and engineering reports. There it all was, my signature, my license number, the specifications. I had stamped myself when the subdivision was first laid out. The irony was too rich, the very roads the HOA drove on every day. The drainage ditches they ignored until they clogged, the entryway they decorated with flowers, all of it had come through my desk. I knew the load-bearing capacity of their culverts, the compaction ratios of their subgrade, even the projected traffic patterns. They wanted to argue gravel. I was the authority they should have been thanking. I spent weeks building my file. Every violation notice, every unanswered email, every page of county documentation. I photographed my driveway, cataloged the type and grade of gravel I had used, even pulled the ASTM specifications showing it met federal standards for low-volume residential roads. At night, while my wife shook her head at how ridiculous it all was, I sat at the dining table highlighting sections of the HOA bylaws and comparing them to state property codes. I wasn't just going to prove them wrong. I was going to dismantle their entire facade of authority. By the time the next board meeting rolled around, I was ready. They didn't know it, but the trap was set. When my name came up on the agenda, the president immediately launched into a rehearsed speech about non-compliance and the integrity of neighborhood standards. She didn't notice the packet under my arm until I slid it across the table. Inside was the full subdivision infrastructure file, stamped with county approval, bearing my name on the cover page as the lead engineer of record. I didn't have to say much. Just pointed out that the very gravel mix I used on my driveway was the same spec that had been approved for every roadway in the subdivision. In other words, if my driveway was a violation, then every single road the HOA maintained was also in violation of its own rules. The silence in that room was better than applause. The lawyer they had hired, some fresh graduate who probably thought HOA law was easy work, flipped through the pages, his face sinking as he realized what it meant. The president sputtered something about context and appearance, but it was too late. Their bluff had been called with county records, engineering stamps, and legal precedent. I didn't need to raise my voice. The documents did all. The shouting from me. After that night, the violation letters stopped. The fines disappeared from my account ledger. The HOA attorney quietly resigned from the case. A few months later, the president stepped down, citing health reasons, though I suspect it was more about the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by a retired engineer. Neighbors who had avoided me for months started nodding or even smiling when I passed. Some even came by quietly to ask if I still had those old plans, because they were tired of being pushed around too. As for me, I went back to spreading gravel on my driveway when it needed it. I didn't do it to spite anyone. I did it because it was practical, affordable, and durable. And now, no one dares to say a word. The HOA still exists, technically, but it's quieter, humbled, stripped of its arrogance. They know I'm not someone to pick a fight with, not because I yell or threaten, but because I understand the ground they're standing on better than they ever will. So when I look out at my drive, meet rows of aggregate crunching under the tires, I smile. It's not just gravel, it's proof. Proof that when people try to bully you with empty authority, the surest revenge is to remind them, calmly and firmly, that the foundation they're standing on was built by your hands in the first place.